one of those things, like the very first thing I made a video about when it came to Jordan Peterson was his claims about IQ. And this was also the third video in my IQ series. And Jordan Peterson makes the claim that IQ is very much fixed. You can't really improve someone's IQ. He also makes the claim that IQ is like this very predictable predictor of how you will end up in life. You can make all kinds of predictions based on IQ results, and they always turn out to be true, and blah, 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 blah. And I show that, one, no, IQ is not fixed. We know, and it's funny because in that video, I literally show like, I think 50 studies or so proving him wrong. And these studies go as far back as the 1930s. Yes, we've known since the 1930s, Jordan, that no, you can increase IQ, and you can do it by quite a lot. You can do it by almost a standard deviation even, with intervention in school and whatnot. Even adults can increase their IQ. So if IQ really is this real thing that you want to make it out to be, it's still not a fixed thing. It can actually be improved by environment. Like, we know this, we have evidence of this. So that's wrong. And also I show in my video that IQ is also not this very reliable predictor at all. Like, the coefficient between how you will end up in life and your IQ results, it's only a moderate correlation. It's somewhere around 0.4, which in any social science is only a moderate correlation. In order to have a strong correlation, you would need at least 0.6. But yeah, it's only 0.4. So yeah, there is some correlation, but this can in turn easily be explained by the fact that you have an equally strong correlation between education and where you will end up in life, you know? And there is an even stronger predictor of where you will end up in life, and that's personality. Yes, personality has somewhere around 0.6 and 0.7, far stronger, noticeably stronger than IQ. So when it comes to those two claims, he can shove it up his postmodernist ass.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought up race realism, and well, you talked about IQ mostly, but you know, it's connected with the whole race realism question though. That was actually one of the topics I was really excited to talk about. Okay, so like, how would you like respond to those that say that because race is such a taboo subject to talk about, this race realism stuff, the reason why it's not, you know, popular, or why there's no like general consensus on it in academia, is because, you know, it's just like hard to talk about, you know, like, because how do I put this? How to explain this? Because like it, you know, like, you know, it's that basically like the more something is hard to talk about, the more likely there might be some truth to it. I don't know if that makes sense.
I see your point, but I've heard it before, and my response would be, well, it depends in what context, or what context are we talking? Because in some instances, yeah, race, so-called race, is taboo. I would agree, but in other contexts, it's definitely not. I mean, take the U.S. government. The U.S. government, I mean, for fuck's sake, the U.S. government even classifies people to this day in so-called race. You know. So, okay, well, in the halls of the government, apparently race is not taboo at all right? So really what these people are talking about is the social context of it, like the social sphere of it. That's really where you have a bit of a political correctness when it comes to this. And but yeah, then you also have to ask the question, well, what you claim to be controversial, is there really anything to it to begin with that would warrant it in the first place? And I mean, is there a taboo against the idea of race in popular media, for instance, in the mainstream media? I would say yes, but that doesn't mean that it's anything worth defending just because of that. Like, plenty of things are taboo and not worthy of being defended. I mean, a brother and sister getting it on is taboo. It doesn't mean that it should be allowed, though. Sure. You know, so not everything that's taboo is automatically something noble and worth of bringing into the spotlight. Like, sometimes there's a reason why it's kind of taboo. That being said, if you want to talk about so-called race, I think of course you should be. And I'm not one of those people who want to shut you down for talking about it. I mean, if you want to be a goofball and talk about them blacks, you know, eating their fucking fried chicken and having their grape drank, and shooting hoops and stealing televisions, and if you want to have your fucking little soapbox and standing on a street corner and shout that kind of nonsense around, I think you should be perfectly allowed to. And if anyone tries to shut you down, I'm going to fight that person because you have a right to speak. And know this, I think you should be heard because that's the perfect inoculation of the general population against your nonsense. Because the only reason these people are actually getting any kind of traction is, like I said, it's because they've been driven into the underground and they're using the current meme culture as camouflage. Sunlight is the perfect disinfectant against the race realists. And what was I going to say? Let's see now. I think I lost my train of thought here.
Yeah, I personally don't go after it because I don't really know that much about it in order to add anything really, and I just find the whole discussion really so toxic that I just thought, you know what, I'm not gonna bother. But mainly for me, I don't know anything about it in order to contribute at all in any meaningful way, personally.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I'm still largely very ignorant on the subject, and I hope to do more research about this so I can have an actual, formed opinion. Because I don't like saying something, like espousing a view when I don't even know all the facts about it, I don't want to have a Jordan Peterson moment. So I actually had a chat with an actual race realist. You might know his name, David Cedarwood.
Oh, that guy. Yeah.
Yeah. When I think it was him. It might have been someone else. But I remember when I was having a conversation with him. You can, you can check out my channel. There's did a whole podcast episode with him. He mentioned that that IQ is inherited, and that it's like between 50 and 80% genetic.
Oh God, this claim.
Yeah. How do you respond to that?
I've already responded to that claim in one of my IQ videos. There's this paper that's being thrown around from 2011, I think, and it's about how there are polygenic genes for intelligence and whatnot, and they found a 50% correlation or so between the different populations that they tested. And the problem, though, is all of these studies are they're not the kind of studies where you can draw that kind of conclusion. Like all those studies are these polygenic studies. They are simply just studies to find candidate genes to do further research on. So all these studies are saying, is that, well, these genes are interesting. They're overrepresented, but we won't know anything until we do further testing. And we need to do like knockout studies and stuff. So that's all those polygenic studies mean. And also these people seem to think that intelligence somehow is a simple trait, like what kind of eye color are you going to have? What's your hair color? The thing is, like, it doesn't matter how you were raised. If you have blue eyes, you have blue eyes. You're born with it. It's entirely 100% genetic. So it's a so-called simple trait in genetics. Complicated traits, complex traits are those who are influenced by both genetics and environment. And the exact extent as to which genetics influence is hard to say. And intelligence is very much a complex trait. We know that environment plays a huge part when it comes to intelligence. And to in any way frame the idea of this as though intelligence is a simple trait that can easily be quantifiable in terms of inheritance and genetics is fundamentally dishonest, because it can't. It is a complex trait, and we know that environment plays a huge part in it. So to say that you have this percentage that you can say this is how much it's inherited or not, that's fundamentally dishonest, because you don't actually know that. And it's very much possible that we may never know truly how much of intelligence, so-called, is actually genetic or not. And even then, you would only have an average for a population. It still wouldn't tell you anything about the individuals within the population, because guess what? Between individuals, you would still have variation of, well, in some individuals, it would really be more environment than genetics. In others, it would be more genetics than environment and whatnot. So all you could ever derive, if you ever got any kind of answer to this at all, which I simply don't think you ever will, but let's say that you did, it still doesn't actually solve anything, because you still have the individual question. Individually, people are still going to, differentiate. So let's say that you actually found this number on average to be 50% of the genes, and the other 50% is due to environment. Let's just say for the sake of argument that this is the case. Well, you still have the problem that it is still just an average. On a case-by-case basis, people would still differ, and in some cases you would have more environment playing a more important role than genetics, and then vice versa. So yeah, it still comes down to individuals, and that's what I find so fucking hilarious about all of this. It's like,
while they're promoting individualism, being an individual and so on.
Oh yeah, I'm totally an individual, white power.
Oh my god.
It's funny because these people, they talk about how there's apparently an echo chamber in academia, and ironically, it's really only one organization pushing their shit.
Okay. Do you think they might argue, just to play devil's advocate, do you think they might argue like, oh, just because they are funded by this, that means therefore everything they say is like wrong? I'm sure they probably respond with that, saying, oh, just because this, therefore this, and they'll probably say that's not a good argument. You must not want to respond to our argument, so you just attack the people who fund us or something like that.
All right, so to that I would ask them, so if Marlboro funded a research project showing that cigarettes don't give lung cancer, I guess they wouldn't have a problem with it.
That's true.
Okay.
I mean, here's the thing. When it comes to scientific research, when it comes to pushing your papers, there is such a thing as a valid ad hominem. Just like in a court, you would not accept the testimony of someone who has something to gain from that testimony, right? So, for instance, you don't accept testimony from a brother in a court of law because, well, they're protective of their brother, perhaps. Yeah. Who may have robbed a store, so they're probably gonna lie in court just to protect their brother, which is natural. Or in a court of law, you're probably not going to accept it's the same thing in peer review. Or publishing a paper, you're probably not going to trust the research of someone who has something to gain from that research. That's just how it works. And if they don't like it, well, they don't have any place in fucking academia. That's literally how it works. It's a safeguard we have to make sure that you don't have bad ideas being spread without evidence. That's just how it works. And if they want to criticize that, well, they're being fucking hypocrites. Because they are the ones who want to, shut down academia in that case and spread their nonsense. But yeah, no, that's how it works. Just for the same reason that you wouldn't accept a paper showing that smoking doesn't give lung cancer if it was funded by Marlboro, there's no reason to think that there's any legitimacy to this because, like I said, it really is only this think tank and a very few other backers, mind you, who actually support this kind of research.
Okay.
That being said, also I would like to add another thing though, because I know what these people are going to say next. Well, there's a political correctness in academia against researching on this topic and blah blah blah. No, there really isn't. There really isn't. I don't know what the fuck these people are talking about. They talk about this political correctness in academia, shutting down research on race and whatnot. Motherfucker, have you looked at any kind of social science paper? I don't even need to go into any actual biological paper here. Just look at the social science papers, which without a doubt, social science is without a doubt the most politically correct of all institutions of academia, without a doubt. You will find plenty of papers using terms like black, Asian, and whatnot, using racial epithets is not forbidden. it's actually the norm, even though there's no real scientific value to it. But it's usually the case in these papers that within the paper, they usually define what they actually mean by those terms. And it's just a way to sort of simplify the statistics. So yeah, no, they're like, no, you can find plenty of papers from other places in academia using the connotation of race without a problem. They're not shut down. You can even find scientific papers on so-called racial IQ by your mainstream universities in the US. It's not that hard to find them. The reason they don't bring those up, though, is that they usually don't support them. It's usually often the papers that are funded by this think tank and others like it. Those are the papers that they want to push, you see, which is very, very, very interesting. Right, and I can actually mention a funny thing. I actually had this. I had this fucking moron who was into race realism, and he said, "You're a hypocrite because you admit that there's gender differences, but you won't admit that there's difference between race." And I asked him this, and I think this was this felt so good. I asked him, can you point to the black chromosome? Yeah, see, that's the thing. There's an entire chromosomes difference between men and women. You know, that's a pretty big genetic difference. There is no such thing as the black or Asian or fucking Eskimo chromosome, right? Like it's not equivalent, for fuck's sake. Just, you know, it's ridiculous.
Thank you for tuning in on the Classy Liberal Podcast. If you'd like to receive updates on future podcast episodes, then consider giving me a follow on Twitter. If you like this podcast, then I recommend you check out my YouTube channel. I have other videos on many topics. If you really enjoy the show and would like to support me, then consider becoming a Patreon on my Patreon. Thank you very much.